Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well and welcome to yet another edition of What I've Been Watching. This is the series where I dive into some of the films and TV shows that I have been checking out behind the scenes that I haven't yet had a chance to review on my channel. And we have quite the lineup this time around, guys, because I have been catching up on a lot of the 2023 releases that didn't come out until 2024 here in the UK. So I have some pretty exciting movies to dive into for today's video. Yes, this is going to be the movie edition, a follow-up to the TV show edition that I did a few weeks back. Although there is one exception, which we will dive into in a moment, but if that sounds fun to you and if you really enjoy the What I've Been Watching series, then please be sure to give this video a thumbs up to let me know. And also, as always, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. Now, without further ado, guys, let's dive into this edition of What I've Been Watching. So as I just said, for today's video, we are mostly going to be focusing on the movies that I have been checking out behind the scenes. But the first entry into this, What I've Been Watching, is actually an exception because it is in fact a TV series and it's also a 2024 release worldwide, and that was The Hazbin Hotel. The Hazbin Hotel is an animated series on Amazon Prime that originated as a web series on YouTube created by Vivian Madrano. Now, this series had a pilot that was posted on YouTube a few years back and it went super viral. People absolutely loved the concept of the show. And so fast forward to 2024, where we have a whole full-blown season of the series on Amazon Prime. You want to talk about a come-up story? This is a hell of one. Now, the Hazbin Hotel is a hotel in hell that was actually created by Charlie Morningstar, who is the daughter of Lilith and Lucifer himself. But she isn't taking after her father, the Lord of Hell himself. She is in fact trying to rehabilitate the lost souls in hell so that they can get a second chance at going to heaven. And so that's why she's created the Hazbin Hotel as a sort of rehab center for these souls who are stuck in hell. But it soon becomes clear that the powers that be up there in heaven, including the likes of Adam, the first man, who sucks, and of course he does. Of course he does. He's the first man. Anyways, but it becomes clear that the powers that be have no interest in welcoming any of the souls of hell, even if they have proven themselves to have been rehabilitated in Charlie's hotel, because they have this hierarchy and this old-fashioned way of thinking where one chance is enough, and if you mess up on earth, you're doomed forever. But Charlie isn't going to give up without a fight, and her gaggle of friends made up of Vaggie, who's her girlfriend, and also is holding this massive secret that she once upon a time was an angel herself, okay, and she was part of the extermination crowd that would go after the souls in hell and kill a bunch of them. I don't know how you can kill lost souls, but there was an extermination that would happen every few months and she was a part of them. But thankfully she turned to the good side, which is actually the side of hell in this case. But she's come along for the ride, as well as Angel Dust, the famous or infamous porn star in hell whose soul is owned by Valentino, who is garbage. Like, we're already dealing with people in hell. We're already dealing with lost souls. But if there was a ranking for who's more garbage than the other, Valentino would be right there, right at the bottom. Well, in hell. Okay, in one of the lowest circles of hell, because he sucks. You also have Husk, who is this cat-like being voiced by Keith David, who sounded very familiar to me. Very familiar to me as someone who loves Princess and the Frog. And so in my headcanon, I've chosen to believe that Husk is actually a reincarnation of Dr. Facilier from Princess and the Frog, because they have the exact same voice, courtesy of Keith David. But Husk is the bartender who is dour and depressed, and his soul is also owned by another evil spirit in the form of Alistair, who's a very interesting entity who is both evil, like Valentino, he owns her soul, but also kind of a good guy because he's trying to help Charlie in some ways, but he definitely has his own motives behind his actions. Now you also have Nifty, who is the hotel's cleaner slash not so secret S&M enthusiast, as well as another villain turned good guy, Sir Pentious, who comes to the hotel initially with evil intentions, but then is able to seek their own redemption and eventually even go up to the Golden Gates themselves. This cool gang of demons and lost souls hoping for redemption are able to come together to fight against the evil forces of the angels. The angels who keep genociding all of the lost souls in hell every few months just for the hell of it. Now, like I said, this video was supposed to be a movie edition of what I've been watching, but I just could not go a single day further without talking about Hazbin Hotel, because this has been one of my favorite releases of 2024 so far. Guys, I love this series. The series is a hit. The series is a hit. First of all, the first thing that you need to know about the series, if you haven't watched it somehow, first of all, fix that immediately. But you need to know that this is a very adult animated series. Like, this is not for kids, okay? It's very adult. We're dealing with some pretty deep themes here, and I think they did a really great job of exploring them, especially with the character of Angel Dust. Angel Dust has my whole freaking heart. I absolutely adore Angel. I want nothing but the best for them. Like, I absolutely love, and also, you guys know me. You guys know I love to ship. Okay, so here's the thing, right? Angel and Husk. How are we feeling about that? Let me know down in the comments if you watched the show. But listen, regardless of if Angel ends up with anyone, because he's been through a lot with Valentino having a chokehold on his whole soul, he's still a brilliant, amazing character who has my entire heart. But every single one of these characters is amazing, okay? I also love Charlie. She's just this do-gooder who's trying her best to redeem these poor souls, these demons in hell, who she sees as deserving of a second chance, especially because these angels come along every few months to rain hell on them. So she's just looking out for her people, and she's in this weird position where she is the princess of hell. Her father is Lucifer, but she's not really taken seriously because she's kind of been a flop up until now, but she's still giving it a good shot. And so you have to root for her as a character as she embarks on this journey, this huge responsibility of taking ownership of these souls and hopefully saving them. And in addition to the amazing characters that I adored from this series, we have a brilliant voice cast bringing them to life, okay? And most of these voice actors are pretty unknown. I would say the most recognizable is Stephanie Beatrice from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. But other than that, we have some really obscure but talented voice cast members giving voices, giving life to these characters. But this voice cast was chosen for a very particular purpose, and that is because they needed to be able to sing as well as talk, because yes, this is a musical adult animated series, which makes it very, very unique. But some of the songs in the soundtrack for Hazbin Hotel have been playing on repeat on my Spotify. I might just see them on my Spotify Wrapped at the end of the year, guys. I'm not even lying. Like, some of these Angel songs, oh my god. Loser has been playing on repeat on my Spotify, on my mind, in my dreams. I love that song. And again, Keith David coming back to give us yet another musical hit after Friends on the Other Side. I love the musical element of this series. Not every single song hits like Loser or Poison, but I do think that the songs give the series such a unique element to it. They do a good job of, you know, telling the story of what's happening to the characters through the music. and the songs are really well written as well. So even though they're not all as catchy as Lisa and Poison, I do think that they not only serve a great purpose to the storytelling, but also allow the series to stand out as something that we really haven't seen before, at least not in recent memory. And another thing that makes the series stand out is the beautiful animation style. I have to give it up to my good sister Vivian Medrano, who did an amazing job with the character design, with designing this world, the world building, the way that she conceptualized heaven and hell. Like, it's just mwah, it's magnifique. I love the designs of the demons, the fact that they resemble animals, but just in this like weird, obscure way. But somehow their physical characterizations match their personalities perfectly, especially Angel. Especially Angel and Husk. Okay, no, all of them. And Sir Precious as well is also a brilliant example of this. But all of these characters are just beautifully animated. The entire series is just so unique in its style of animation, and you guys know how I feel about unique animation. I go crazy over it, especially when it's done well, and this Hazbin Hotel is done really, really well. You can see there's a lot of heart and talent and passion and dedication put into this show, and I think it stems from the fact that Vivian got the opportunity to work with A24 and Amazon to bring this to life after it was just a web series on YouTube. So guys, we have a lot to discuss today, so we need to move on, but I have to say, overall, Hazbin Hotel is one of my favorite things that I have been watching lately. Like, I absolutely love this series. I can't wait for season 2. And if there were any critiques that I would give to the series, it's that, you know, one, there are a couple of episodes that are slightly weaker than others, but two, there just aren't enough episodes overall. There aren't enough episodes overall. I wanted more. I think there are only, what, 7 or 8 episodes? Yeah, boo. We need more. We need more episodes of this show. Okay, what is it with some of these best shows from 2024 just having like 2 episodes? 2 episodes with hopes and dreams. Like, I'm looking at you, Ted, and Hazbin Hotel. Okay, I want more of this. But listen, like I said, we need to move on. And next up on the list, we've got American Fiction. American Fiction is a film that was written and directed by Cord Jefferson and stars Jeffrey Wright. And this is one of the 2023 releases that I was desperately trying to get my hands on, but unfortunately it only came out a couple of weeks back here in the UK. But I was so happy to finally get a chance to see this film, and I'm even more delighted to inform you that it was absolutely brilliant. I really loved American Fiction. I thought it was really insightful and clever and just brilliantly written and directed, and I think Cord Jefferson is wholly deserving of the praise and nominations that he's been getting during awards season. Like, I see it now. I see it now because I've seen the film. So this movie centers on Jeffrey Wright's character, who's called Monk, and he is this upper class African American writer who's also in academia, but he's become disenchanted by his career because his book sales have slowed down. He isn't a successful writer at the moment, and one of the main reasons is because all of these publishers are demanding that he write something black. You know, he's an African American writer. He's supposed to be writing black stuff, right? Like, he's supposed to be writing stuff that's about the black experience and black suffering and black hardships, and you know, then you'll get the sales, then you'll get the publishers willing to buy your book, but the stuff that he's writing about is esoteric, it's academic, it has nothing to do with blackness, and so that's not what they're looking for from a writer like him. Essentially, this is a very clever commentary on how our white majority societies will put minority groups into boxes and expect the creatives in these groups to create certain things, tell certain stories that reflect on their suffering, their pain, their trauma, their hardships, and nothing else. And when they try to step out of that box, when they try to do something different and feels more in line with what their interests are, they are met with either friction or contempt or no attention at all. So this film seeks to fight against the boxes that these white majority establishments try to put on minority creatives, especially black creatives. And you have, one example of a black writer who is brilliantly portrayed by Issa Rae, who has tapped into what these publishers are expecting of her as a black writer. She's giving them what she wants in the form of this story about, black people, black characters that are facing struggle and strife and trauma, that do speak in heavy AAVE to really hammer home the fact that they are black. And of course, she ends up being a New York bestseller, and she finds a lot of success because she's tapped into what they are expecting of her. But that's not to say that she's not wise to the game. She just knows how to navigate it better than Monk does, because on top of everything else, Monk is actually a really deeply flawed person who is very much on his high horse. Even though he's right to be frustrated by the fact that these publishers want to put him in this box and only expect him to produce a certain kind of art or, piece of work, he's completely right to have that frustration. But the way that he expresses himself, the way that he treats the people in his life, both his family members and also new people that come along, like his girlfriend, it's just so abhorrent, okay? It's just so deplorable, and that's what adds some complexity to this character. It's the fact that he is kind of right in a lot of ways, but god damn it, are you reluctant to admit it because he's such an unlikable man. Now, whilst Monk is busy having this very interesting sociological debate about whether or not black creatives should pander to white majority audiences to find success, he finds himself in a very difficult position back at home, where his sister abruptly passes away and his mother starts to show signs of Alzheimer's. And so he has to step up and financially support his family, and the only way that he can do so is if he sells books. And it just so happens that on a whim, in a flurry of anger, frustration, and self-righteousness, he whipped up this book that would pander to white audiences, and it was called, I don't know, I think it's just called The F Word, and it originally was called something else, but it's full of, AAVE, it's full of slang, and it's supposed to be written from the perspective of a black man living in the ghetto. Even though this man is upper class and has never seen such a thing, he's never been in the projects, okay? But he's writing from the perspective of someone who has, and it's supposed to be a joke initially, but of course, with the way that the world works, it ends up being a massive success, and the book gets published under his alias's name. So he's able to fund his mother's health care, but all the while he's stewing and boiling and bubbling on the inside because he knows that his point has very much been proven. So overall, when it comes to American fiction, I would say the strongest elements here are the writing. I think Core Jefferson's script is absolutely phenomenal. He does such a good job of, presenting the arguments for why this pandering is so frustrating to the character of Monk, why he does feel so restricted as an academic who wants to explore different topics but is constantly told that he's not black enough as an African American writer, but also diving into Monk's psyche and the fact that he is such a flawed human being who makes such huge mistakes in his life and drives the people closest to him away. I think the script does a really great job of balancing that and showing that perhaps sometimes the worst person the worst person that you've ever met sometimes can be right. You know what they say about them broken clocks? Another shining element to this film is, of course, the acting. The entire cast brings their A game to this movie. You have, of course, Jeffrey Wright, who is brilliant as this gruff, unlikable, yet extremely privileged and upper class monk, who, like I said, for the most part is really unlikable. Really unlikable, but again, broken clocks and all that. We also have Tracy Ellis Ross, who portrays his sister, who isn't in the film for too long because, like I said, she passes away, but she was really, really great as well, and also brilliant casting in terms of them actually looking like siblings, which I appreciated. Although on the flip side, you have someone who didn't really look like a sibling in the form of Sterling K. Brown, who was also really great in this film. Although I have to say, not to put too much of a negative spin on this, because I did really like Sterling K. Brown in this film, and I think he's an incredible actor overall. Like, please, he's one of the best actors working today. But having seen American Fiction, I wouldn't say that his performance in the film was like Oscar worthy. Listen, we are going to be talking about some really great films, you know, on this list. And to see that Sterling K. Brown took one of the slots of some of these other actors in these films is a little bit like, it's a bit of a head scratcher to me, because again, I think he's great, but I don't think he's in the film as much, and it doesn't play as much of a role as I would have thought that he would, considering the fact that he was nominated for the Oscar. I would have expected a bit more from his storyline for that to seem warranted. But listen, the entire cast is absolutely perfect in this film. They really drive the story forward, and I think the story itself is very timely, considering that we are starting to see a bit more Black representation in Hollywood, and we're starting to dive into the diversification of representation. And so to have a film that does discuss, you know, what it means to be a Black creative and the kinds of stories and projects and art that is expected from Black creatives, I think this is a really interesting and powerful discussion to have, and it's done so in this very satirical and comedic, sarcastic, tongue-in-cheek way that makes for a really engaging and entertaining film. Okay, so next up on the list we have a film that was one of my most highly anticipated films of 2023, and I had to wait not just one entire year, not just one entire year, but then an additional 2 more months, almost 3 months, to see this film, because I only finally got a chance to see it yesterday. Literally only got a chance to see it yesterday, and I was waiting. That's why this video is late, by the way, because I was waiting and waiting and waiting until I finally got to see this film, because I said there's no way I can film a What I've Been Watching movie edition without featuring The Color Purple. And guys, no pretenses involved. This film is perfect. This film is perfect. It's everything that I wanted it to be and more. It's easily one of my favorite films of 2023, but I'm going to be counting it as a 2024 release because it literally came out this year in the UK. So keep that in mind for the end of the year, okay? But The Color, what can I even say? What can I even say? Look at the smile on my face, guys. Like, it was just magic. It was just brilliant. Perfect. And the fact that this film barely made a dent at the box office is a travesty. It deserved so much better. And that is a sure sign that this is in fact a 2023 release, because that was a trend throughout the entire year last year. Now, The Color Purple 2024 is of course another remake of the famous novel by Alice Walker. But this time around we have a musical version of the story, which is an adaptation of the theatre production. But it is yet another retelling of the famous story of the young girl Celie, who lived with her sister Nettie down in the South. I think it's Georgia that they're from. And this is set in the early 20th century, where she absolutely suffers in this household under her father, who abuses her and in fact impregnates her, and ends up taking her children away and sending them off so she can't even raise them on her own. She is treated like a servant, a slave in her own house, and is abused and tortured physically and psychologically all throughout her life by these men. And very early on in the story, she's married off to Mr., who is portrayed by Coleman Domingo here, who has a huge villainous turn. After seeing him in Rustin, it was quite jarring, but he also gives a brilliant performance here, even though he is scum. But Mr. treats Celie with such disrespect. She is abused in that house and she's treated like, again, a slave. And she spends the majority of her youth under the boot of these horrible, terrible men. But the only bright spots in her life are thoughts of her children being somewhere, living better lives than she did, but also of her sister Nettie, who is taken away from her very early in the story, but she still thinks of her all the time, and it still brings her hope and faith, even though over the years she begins to suspect that Nettie has passed away because she didn't write to her the way that she promised to when she was kicked out of Mr.'s house. But it turns out that Mr. was hoarding all of Nettie's letters, and she was in fact writing to her every single week as she promised, but unfortunately Celie wasn't able to see those letters until many, many years after. But in the meantime, Celie lives a really difficult and sad life. But throughout the years, she comes across these fascinating Black women, all unique in their personalities and characteristics, and they all teach her some things about womanhood and about the kind of woman that she could be one day if she got away from the boot of these horrible men. One such person is Sophia, who is absolutely ferocious. She is a force of nature. She doesn't take any crap from any man, and she ends up marrying Mr.'s son. And the relationship is interesting. It's definitely still abusive, even on Sophia's side. But on one occasion, Mr.'s son has had enough, and he goes to Celie for some advice on how he can make his wife as submissive as she is. And Celie advises him to beat his wife because she is so broken, she's so traumatized, and also she's so jealous of Sophia's spirit and the fight that she has in her. And so she gives Mr. Son that horrible advice, which ends up breaking their marriage. And Sophia goes off in this powerful song, which actually made me cry in the cinema, because she says hell no. She says hell no, and that's the end of that. Another powerful, formidable female figure that comes into Celie's life is none other than Shug Avery, who's portrayed by Taraji P. Henson, and she is an incredible woman. She's a very talented blues singer who travels across America with her sultry tunes, but she originates from that community. Her father is the pastor of their church, and they have a very difficult relationship because he sees her as having, turned her back on her religion, on her faith, in order to sing the blues, which she disapproves of. But in the meantime, she does return to Georgia to perform, and she and Celie build this really deep connection that turns romantic as Celie learns things about herself that she never even knew, and she falls in love with Shug Avery, who is this chaotic force of nature that is also an alcoholic and also has her own problems, but that such is the complexity of all of these characters. But listen, overall, what really struck me about the retelling of this famous, incredible story was the idea that life is long. I know people tend to say life is short, and I get it because time goes by so quickly, but I am of the personal belief that life is long. No matter how long your life is, living is the longest thing you will ever do. If you think about it that way, life is literally the longest thing that will ever happen to you. And so here you have the story of this woman that goes through the lowest of lows in her early life, and it's obviously implied or outright said that a lot of the treatment that she receives is down to colorism. She's a dark-skinned girl, she's plus size, she's not respected or liked or appreciated by the Black men in her community, and so they treat her like less than garbage. And you see the preferential treatment that they give to some of the lighter skinned women in the community, like Shug Avery and even her own sister Nettie. So that also plays a part in how she's treated. But you see her just go through hell hell in her early years in the hands of these men who take too many years away from her. But then as the story goes on and you start to see hope, especially with the influence of these really powerful women, she finally is able to get out of that goddamn house after she's had enough. Enough is enough. And she's able to have a whole new lease in life. She's able to build something for herself, you know, with her own shop, with her own career, with her own new path. And it just hammers home that message that, again, life is long. And even if someone has experienced such great trauma, tragedy, and pain, there is still hope that things could turn around and there could be light in the other side of the tunnel. Now, of course, the story itself is incredible. It stood the test of time. There's a reason why we keep seeing adaptations of it. But this specific adaptation is also brilliant because it is adapting the stage musical. So we do have musical elements here. And going into this, I was a bit nervous / curious to see how they would incorporate the musical elements to this version of the story, because it's so sad and it deals with such difficult topics. You know, I watched the Steven Spielberg film, so I already knew that this was going to be an emotional roller coaster, but I was happy to see that the songs in this film are incorporated seamlessly. They help drive the story forward. The lyrics are really meaningful. The performances, everyone gives their freaking A game for the performances, vocally, physically. Like it's just incredible to witness, guys. Guys, listen, I don't know what to tell. It's one of the best things I've seen in recent years. The musical numbers were just faultless. The songs were just brilliantly sung. I mean, you have Fantasia's voice is heaven. Like, nah. Fantasia Barrino gave the performance of a lifetime in this film. The performance of a lifetime. And the fact that she was singing, the fact that she had the voice of a literal angel. Come on. Some of us are comparing apples to oranges, and it's like, after seeing this film and looking upon the landscape of awards season, I'm starting to see that this is all just a massive joke. Like, I'm starting to take these award shows less and less seriously, because after what I just witnessed, let me not even say too much. And also, if there was any justice in the world, we would be having a conversation about Felicia Pearl Passy, who portrays young Celie, because she was also phenomenal. And she was in this film a ton, like way more than Emily Blunt was in Oppenheimer. No, but seriously, like, why is it that we're not giving Felicia any of the credit that she's due? Because she was absolutely incredible here. As was Danielle Brooks, who was just incredible. I knew she would be incredible. I said as much even before I saw this film, but she was phenomenal. I mean, in the first half of the film, you see her be this powerful presence in Celie's life that inspires her just as much as it intimidates her and makes her feel jealous and insecure. But then later on in the story, Sophia goes through great hardship as she is taken to prison for just standing up for herself, something that she has always done. But this time around, she stood up to the wrong person, white people, and so she ends up suffering, withering away in prison, and all of that light and the fight that she had in her dies away almost forever, but there is hope at the end. And finally, another person that really and truly should be front and center of the awards discussion is Taraji P. Henson in her role as Suge Avery. What do I even, like, Taraji P. Henson in this film was immaculate. She was perfect in this role. She delivered such an amazing performance as this charismatic, lovable blues singer that the entire town is obsessed with. But she also shows layers in this character because she's an alcoholic and she's unstable. She's unreliable. You know, you have Celie falling in love with her and she feels something for Celie, but you always get the sense that she's so flighty. She's not really 100% with anyone, even the people that she does have a preference for. She exists in the grey area because she had a thing going on with Mr. And it's like, how can you even tolerate a man who is just so demonic? Literally just the scum of the earth. But they have this weird relationship. And yes, she does stand up for Seeley, but she doesn't give Mr. nearly enough grief considering how trash of a human being he is. But she ultimately does do the right thing and save Seeley from Mr. and from that horrible household of hell. In fact, let me not even talk too much on hell, because Hazbin Hotel showed me that hell isn't all that bad. Okay, hell isn't even as bad as Mr.'s house, but she finally took Seeley away, saving her from that horrible decrepit man. And like I said, they have a lot of love for each other. Like, here you have a representation of an LGBTQ couple that is messy and unclear, especially considering the timeline that this happens in, but the love that they share is undoubtable, and it's expressed beautifully through that musical number. And once again, it breaks my heart that not enough people have seen this new version of The Color Purple, because I thought this film was near perfection. The only thing, the only critique that I would give it would be perhaps the ending, especially with Mr. Listen, Mr. tries to redeem himself for whatever, as if he ever could. Okay, after Seeley curses him, rightfully so, she curses him as she leaves, and so he finds his life crumbling around him. His crops won't grow, he's drunk all the time, he's falling asleep in the mud, and like, this is what he deserves. We should have just ended it there. But then the character has a redemption, where he helps Nettie come back from Africa. He gets her the immigration papers or whatever, and it's like, no. It's like, no, really and truly, like, Suge could have done that. Like, if Suge had done that for her friend slash girlfriend, that would have been perfect, and then Nettie could be back home and everything would be amazing, as Mr. was out there rotting on the ground like he deserved. Like, that's the ending that I wanted. But instead they made it really churchy and preachy. And they were all sitting around an ancient tree holding hands singing Kumbaya, and I was just like, ugh, Mr. doesn't deserve to be there at all. Okay, so next up on the list, we've got an actual 2024 release in the form of The Book of Clarence. The Book of Clarence is directed by James Samuel and stars Lakeith Stanfield as the titular character Clarence, who is living in the biblical times. Yes, speaking of religious overtones, this film is a fictional retelling of the New Testament, the Jesus times, where he was wandering around with his 12 disciples, except this time we have Clarence, okay, who was wandering around with him apparently, except we didn't really hear that side of the story from the Bible. He's just out here on these streets trying to survive and get his mom out of essentially the biblical era ghetto. Now, at the beginning of the film, we're introduced to Clarence and his bestie slash partner in crime Elijah during a chariot race, which they promptly lose to Mary Magdalene, who is portrayed by Tiana Taylor. Now, unfortunately, Clarence was desperately trying to win that chariot race so that he can get some money to repay this vicious loan shark called Jebediah the Terrible. But now that he's lost, he has no hope of getting that money back to Jebediah, and so he has to be creative and figure out another way to do so. And one such way that he comes up with is becoming the new Messiah. He decides to become Jesus. He decides to become the new Messiah, despite the fact that he doesn't even believe in God and doesn't believe in any of Jesus's teachings. But he tries to find a way to embody the holiness of Jesus, who's still wandering around the streets, mind you, to try and find a way to get a whole host of loyal fans that will shower him with silver. Now, when it comes to the story, I don't want to reveal too much at all, because I suspect that you haven't watched it. I suspect that you haven't watched this film, and I would highly recommend that you check this out as a matter of urgency, because Book of Clarence is absolutely brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant. Now, I'm not even surprised, because one of the reasons why I was so excited to watch this film in the first place is because it's directed by James Samuel, who also directed The Harder They Fall, one of the best films of recent years. This was a Netflix movie that starred Jonathan Majors, as well as some other great actors, including Lakeith Stanfield. He's back, okay? But this was a cowboy western film that centered on these black characters, and it was such a cleverly written, brilliantly directed and stylized film that puts James Samuel on the map. And here we have a follow-up to it that is just as stylistic, just as clever, just as brilliantly directed, perhaps not as well written, which we'll get into in a second, but honestly just as unique of a film as The Harder They Fall was. And it just brings me such joy and happiness to see black filmmakers like this working in Hollywood today and producing some of the best stuff that I have seen in years, because it's just so refreshing, it's so unique, and it's very much needed in this otherwise pretty dull landscape. Now, one of my favorite things that I've been seeing from black filmmakers lately is some Afro-surrealism. Now, this is something that I've discussed a couple of times, but most recently I dived into it during the Genie Awards in reference to last year's productions, I'm a Virgo, Swarm, and They Cloned Tyrone. Well, we can add the Book of Clarence to that pile because yes, it is another example of an Afro-surrealist piece. Here we have a retelling of the New Testament with some additional black fictional characters, and we have an abundance of Afro-surrealist elements, like for instance when Clarence takes opium and he finds himself literally flying high off the ground and that's where he gets the bright idea, cue the literal light bulb, to pretend to be the Messiah in order to get the money that he needs to pay back Jebediah. I think the Afro-surrealist elements of this film are done spectacularly well, and they seamlessly blend into James Samuel's directing style. We saw elements of this in The Harder They Fall, and he just kind of goes even further with it here. And closely tied to the Afro-surrealism, we have the satirical comedic tone of the film, which works absolutely perfectly, again with James Samuel's directing style and his storytelling, but also with the cast, who is absolutely brilliant. I mean, we have Lakeith Stanfield at the forefront here, who is one of my favorite actors working today. And he is brilliant here, not only portraying Clarence, the eponymous character, but also portraying his own twin Thomas, who is one of the disciples. Funnily enough, in the Bible, Thomas was the doubter, but here it's Clarence who doubts all of the teachings that the disciples follow. But even still, he sets off on his journey to become his own Jesus so that he can pay back those debts. But the entire cast here is absolutely phenomenal and chock full of incredible, talented black actors. As I mentioned, we have Teyana Taylor portraying Mary Magdalene. We also have, guys, we also have another favorite of mine, Omar Sy. Omar Sy portraying Barabbas. When I saw him appear on screen, I said, ain't no way, Lupe himself is in this film. We also got David Oyelowo portraying John the Baptist, Michael Ward portraying Judas, and many more. But listen, overall, when it comes to the Book of Clarence, this is another hit. Not box office wise, because unfortunately it flopped at the box office. Guys, you need to stop letting these good films flop. What is going on? But creatively speaking, this film was absolutely a hit. It's brilliantly written. The story itself is so unique and has such a unique perspective. I think the actors delivered brilliant performances, and the casting itself was just absolutely perfect, and again, full of surprises. You also had, great production design here. I mean, James Samuel showed us what he could do with the Wild Wild West in The Harder They Fall, and this time around he's diving into biblical times, Jerusalem, where he's able to deliver just as strongly, which is very impressive. And finally, whilst the first half of the film feels quite light and comedic and Afro-surrealist, near the end we start to become a bit more serious as we're delving more and more into those biblical elements. And I think for the most part that was largely successful, although I will say I did prefer the first half of the film to the second. And if you don't like Bible stories, then that ending is gonna be a bit that ending is gonna be a bit for you. And whilst we are on the topic of some critiques, another critique that I had was of the female characters. I was a little bit disappointed by the depictions of the female characters in this film. I felt like we just needed a bit more from the women and just more women in general. We had a couple in the form of Tiana Taylor's Mary Magdalene, and the last prominent female character that we've got is Verinia, who's portrayed by Anna Diop, and she's really good. But I think the writing for her character is a bit weak and inconsistent, and I would have loved to see more be done with her. I think this time around the disparity between the male characters and the female characters was bigger than The Harder They Fall, and I think that was a bit of a shame because we have this great celebration of black talent here on screen, and I would like to have seen the same kind of treatment for the female characters to what we got for the male one. And the final film that we are going to be discussing for this edition of What I've Been Watching is The Iron Claw. Oh boy. Okay, speaking of crying in the cinema. The Iron Claw is a film directed by Sean Durkin that is centered on the Von Erich family, a Texan family of pro wrestlers that were unfortunately struck by seemingly a magical curse that led to a ton of tragedy in the family throughout the years. But in actuality, the Von Erich family was cursed. They did have a curse amongst them, but it wasn't a magical, fantastical curse. It was in fact very real and very physical and human, and it was their father. It was their father, Jack Von Erich, who absolutely sucked. Absolutely sucked, because he trained / bullied, tortured and traumatized his boys throughout their entire lives, pushing them to the brink for years and years and years so that they could make him proud and become pro wrestlers or pro athletes, the likes of which Texas had never seen before. The Von Erich patriarch had a massive chip on his shoulder, especially as a former pro wrestler himself who helped transform wrestling in Texas and was famous in his own right. But despite his best efforts, he was never able to become a world champion, and this is something that he chased after his entire life until he couldn't anymore, and so he forced his sons to do so. And so this film tells the story of how this man helped make and break his children, helped them flourish to become the most successful pro wrestlers in all of Texan history, but also broke them so completely, psychologically, physically, mentally, to the point where all of these horrible things happened to them because they could not cope with the pressures that was instilled upon them. And some of these horrible tragedies were freak accidents. Not all of them were caused by someone's hand directly, but in my opinion, it's clear to see where the line of accountability begins, and it's with Jack Von Erich. Now, I'm just going to sit here and echo what everyone else has been saying about this film, really. Like, I don't have a new take on the matter. If you want to hear my opinion, it's pretty much the same opinion as everyone else's. First of all, this film is one of the most underrated films of 2023, although I'm counting it as a 2024 release because it literally just came out here in the UK. But it is absolutely beautiful, heartbreaking, inspirational. It's an emotional roller coaster. We have some moments of great pathos, but also great victory as we see these wrestling sequences with these brothers who have trained together fought, died together all their lives, they get to battle it out in front of these massive adoring fans, you know, in the middle of the ring, and they're doing their wrestling thing together. Like, they love spending this time together despite all the hardships that they face, you know, training for this profession. So you have those moments of glory that really make you root for these brothers. But of course, alongside the highest of the highs, you have the lowest of the lows as tragedy repeatedly befalls this family, and you see sequences of people having to put on their best black dress because they have yet another funeral to attend. And the fact that this is based off of a true story, the fact that this actually happened, is just even more heartbreaking. And I didn't know anything about this story. Before this film was released, I had no idea who this wrestling family was. But the film does such a brilliant job of getting you invested in the brothers' story. It doesn't matter if you'd never heard of this family before, because by the end, you feel like you know and understand their story, and it's just absolutely gut-wrenching. Now, another sentiment that I've seen about this film that I will just echo here is that Zac Efron gave the performance of a lifetime as Kevin Von Erich, and the fact that he hasn't gotten any awards recognition is a travesty. Actually, like, it is absolutely just mind-boggling. And that leads us seamlessly into the third sentiment that I have seen, which is that A24 absolutely failed this film, and I completely agree with that. A24 is a relatively small studio, but they had two major contenders for 2023 with Past Lives and The Iron Claw, and they decided to push forward Past Lives for their campaign. And I think it's a complete shame that they gave The Iron Claw the short end of the stick, especially because I think that The Iron Claw is actually a superior film. Like, it's crazy to me. It's crazy to me that someone watched both of these films and was like, right, we're gonna push Past Lives. And I really love Past Lives. I really enjoyed that film. I thought it was a phenomenal film. But The Iron Claw is like, it's like I said, gut-wrenching. Like, it just tears out your soul. Like, it's just so brilliant. I can't believe that A24 just failed to push this film forward for award season. And not just for award season, but just in terms of advertising as well. It was barely advertised. I think it was just failed all around, so that it wouldn't even succeed in terms of awards or box office wise. And once again, considering the brilliant performances in this film, including that by Zac Efron, who should absolutely have been nominated for Best Actor, but also the supporting cast like Jeremy Allen White and Harris Dickinson, they should absolutely be on the boards for Best Supporting Actors, especially Harris Dickinson, I feel. Although Jeremy Allen White, both of them were just phenomenal. They were absolutely brilliant. And remember when I was talking about Sterling K. Brown? Listen, I'm not going to say too much, but just know. And of course, on top of all of that, you have the brilliant writing and directing by Sean Durkin, which absolutely should have been recognized by these awards bodies, including the Academy. He should be up there for best, I think, adapted screenplay this would be, and best director. Like, I'm so serious right now. I'm so serious right now, because the work that he does here, I mean, not only does he deliver on the drama and the pathos of this really great tragedy, but also he delivers on the, you know, action sequences. Like, we have actual wrestling matches here which are engaging and show the skill and talent that these boys had, because they'd been training their entire lives for this. They were made by their father for this, and the action sequences in the film definitely showcase that. So Sean Durkin knocked it out of the park in all fronts, and I think he deserves so much more recognition than what he got because of A24's poor strategizing. At the very least, they could have just delayed this film a year and just pushed it for the 2024 awards circuit. Like, that, That to me would have made more sense than just allowing it to flop like this in the shadow of past lives. Although it must be noted that he did leave out one member of the family in the film, the youngest brother, Chris, who died by suicide about a year before Kerry did. And Sean Durkin said that that was just one too many tragedies for this film, which fair enough, but also if you're going to tell the story, you may as well tell it properly and accurately, considering that these were real life people whose story you're trying to depict on film. So that's a little bit controversial in my mind. But that's it from me, guys. Now that I told you guys what I have been watching, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of these films and the Hazbin Hotel, as well as what you guys have been watching down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.